Welcome to Mission Evolution Radio Show with Gwilda Wiyaka, bringing together today's leading experts to uncover ever-deepening spiritual truths and the latest scientific developments in support of the evolution of humankind. For more information on Mission Evolution Radio with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit www.missionevolution.org. And now, here's the host of Mission Evolution, Miss Gwilda Wiyaka.
Despite our best efforts and the availability of others, connection and bonding sometimes remain elusive. What's wrong? What's causing it? But the key question, is it fixable? Mission Evolution Radio TV show is coming to you around the world on the Voice of Canada Broadcast Network, vocbn.ca. With us this hour to address the availability to bond is Diane Poole Heller. Diane is an internationally recognized speaker, author, and expert in the field of attachment theory and trauma resolution. Her signature series, Adult Attachment DARE, Dynamic Attachment Repatterning Experience, provides tools for healing from trauma and creating more fulfilling relationships. As senior faculty for Somatic Experiencing Institute, Diane studied with Dr. Peter Levine and taught somatic experiencing trauma work internationally for over 25 years. Dr. Heller is the author of The Power of Attachment: How to Create Deep and Lasting Intimate Relationships, Crash Course, and Healing Your Attachment Wounds. Her film, Surviving Columbine, supported healing after the Columbine High School shootings. Her website, traumasolutions.com. Diane, thank you so much for joining us on Mission Evolution.
Thank you for having me. It's a delight to be here.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's a lovely spring day. So, Diane, what's your educational background?
Oh, I have a master's in counseling. I'm a psychotherapist, and I also have a PhD in higher education and social change, with the idea that the more we communicate, the more we can bring transformation and healing. So I love that orientation.
I do too. It's a beauty. So what is trauma resolution?
It's just what we call our internet education outreach that really is for the public and also for professionals to really bring compassion and understanding and healing to trauma as well as to attachment issues where people have some challenges either from developmentally or for later trauma where disconnection kind of takes over and we lose our capacity to really connect. But, you know, we're designed to connect. We're pro-social beings. Our brain is pro-social. Our nervous systems want to co-regulate. So not having that is kind of an estrangement that we can't afford.
It stunts everything, doesn't it? If we don't have that interaction, that ability to hook up and interact. So what is attachment theory?
Attachment theory has been around for a long time, but what I've been trying to do is operationalize it. You know, it's one thing to know the information, it's another thing to how do you live it? How do you move yourself towards secure attachment if you've had attachment injury? And I believe, as John Bowlby believed, that it's biological, that we are born inherently designed to have secure attachment, to know what healthy connection is versus what not healthy connection is. I mean, you know, when someone's mistreating you, usually you can tell, right? So that we have this biological programming, and of course things happen. Maybe our parents, you know, have unresolved trauma from past generations that they're carrying. And so they have some limitations or deficiencies. We're all human. We're all on the journey. We're all trying to do the best we can. But also it's not only just parenting. Maybe we bumped into a medical situation where our mother had to be removed from us, or we had to be removed, you know, because we were born too early, or there's a medical intervention that separates us, or we're born into a war zone, or we're born as a marginalized group. There's different things that are going to influence our ability, whether it's culture or, you know, country or circumstances or caregiving patterns. And usually in a talk like this, I focus predominantly on caregiving patterns and then how they result in certain attachment challenges later on that become sort of knee-jerk in our unconscious, the way we respond to something that's coming at us from a relational perspective. So I'm looking at different ways to help people restore that orientation to secure attachment.
By infants that are born. One thing that I've always been fascinated by is infants when they're first born.
Mm,
They have this need and instinct to bond. They
absolutely.
make eye contact. They're right there, and it only lasts like the first couple of hours. And our way that we, particularly in your and my generation, the way that we were treated in the hospital, we were left alone during that time, snatched away from our mothers, put in a crib
Right.
someplace, and didn't get to bond. And I feel that doesn't that impact from the get go the ability to bond and to connect.
Well, it helps a lot to have people that kind of understand the need to bond. I mean, even to know that if you put a baby skin to skin on the mother's belly, it's better if the baby kind of crawls up and finds the breast than it is to just kind of plop them there, because that's seeking and searching and finding it's actually really good. And in an ideal world, we have, a birth process that's supported. We even believe that attachment patterning happens in utero before you're born, because the baby is really sensitive to absorbing the mother, downloading her taste preferences, but especially her emotional responses. So how is she being treated by people around her, her family, her partner, the other kids, whatever's going on? All of that starts to form a relational template in the infant. And then certainly if there's birth trauma, that's a big thing. It's a big deal. And sometimes that's unavoidable. But when there's a really healthy, happy, birth transition, that's a really big support for secure attachment. I want to say though, because I know a lot of people listening are parents and had different experiences with their kids bringing them in, or how they came in themselves. The attachment system is very forgiving. If we had some attachment disruption, we can learn and practice secure attachment skills later on in life that help repair whatever might have gotten challenging early on. So there's a lot of potential for healing. And once we understand attachment theory, and once we understand how to interact with someone that may have not had the ideal situation. I mean, there's a lot of people on this human journey, me, myself included, that didn't have the ideal scenario. And all hope is not lost. There's tons of hope. This is the main thing I want people to take away, is there's a lot of hope on how we can reconnect and resurrect our capacity to bond, which has been so challenged in the last years, and with the pandemic and with the onslaught of devices instead of, face-to-face contact for many people, and kids kind of lost some really important years of development socially with COVID. So there's a lot to say about that.
Well, if we're brought up and our life is absolutely without challenge, how do we build resilience?
Exactly. Exactly. I remember I read an interview. I'm usually working with people that had really difficult childhoods, but I read an interview about John Travolta, must have been 20 years ago, where he was complaining that his parents made everything so perfect for him, he didn't know how to handle problems. And I thought, oh my gosh, I never thought about that. That you need some grist for the mill, to develop strength and capacities, and it matures us in an ideal sense. But if it's too much, right? Too much challenge or too much trauma, then the opposite can happen. We can contract and stay contracted and get embittered instead of resilient. So there's sort of a pacing dosing issue of how do we help people move towards that resilience, which is really a signal for post-traumatic growth.
So you work with Columbine's trauma resolution with attachment theory. Why do you combine the two in your practice?
Combine trauma and attachment, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think they're kind of a marriage made in heaven, because, trauma doesn't just happen at the beginning of life. I mean, we can bump into medical traumas or natural disasters or political difficult situations or marginalization or, oh my gosh, there are so many different ways we can get overwhelmed. Like an event can just be too much for us to handle. And usually traumas stay traumatic when there's not the presence of another empathetic other person that can really be with you, really present with you as you're trying to process what just happened that was difficult, or even later in life, process what was difficult. Doing it ourselves is really, really hard to overcome trauma. So the connection is, in my opinion, and the presence of that person who you're connecting with is the most important element in healing. And so I was doing trauma work that is wonderful. It's somatic experiencing. It's a fantastic model developed by Peter Levine. And I was teaching that for like, now it's been 35, 40 years because I'm still teaching it. And with Peter in general, but it's like, there's a lot of that focus on nervous system regulation and the physiological changes that happen with trauma, which are very important to understand if you're trying to heal from trauma. Big part of what's happened gets stored in the body. So learning how to tap into that and help it release is really important. What I noticed, though, over all these decades of being in the trenches with all of this, is that one of the elements of trauma is broken connection. And what I felt like wasn't being addressed enough was this sense of broken connection. And it's a really short definition of trauma. Another short one is too much, too soon, too fast. But I felt like for people to really come out the other side of a traumatic experience would be to learn and regain their capacity to deeply, authentically connect to themselves, like my real self, my authentic self. And also, when you have that, then there's a part of the prefrontal cortex or the dorsal vagal nerve, or the ventral vagal nerve, that it opens us to social engagement, and where we actually have a desire and a capacity to deeply, authentically connect with another person. And trauma really challenges that. So I feel like they go together. I don't always, sometimes I'm focusing more on trauma, sometimes I'm focusing more on attachment, but our ability to connect has so much to do with safety and authenticity and the capacity to tolerate, I use that word intentionally, intimacy and deep connection and deep love. So I feel like they're somewhat inherently partners in what needs to happen for people to heal. So in an ideal world, we'd have a lot more understanding of trauma-informed work and attachment-informed healing.
Well, you said something interesting, is that the first attachment is to oneself. But it seems like we're shamed and socialized out of that attachment pretty early on. So it's kind of a hidden wound, isn't it?
You know, it's interesting. Different bodies of work have different ideas on this. So there's a lot of different possibilities to explore. But one of the ideas that I've been exposed to that I think is relevant is that often children developmentally lose their connection to their deepest presence, their deepest real self, their deepest authenticity, usually by about the age of 7, because often, when we come into the world, we're not like the Dalai Lama, where we're surrounded by all these spiritually advanced beings or something. We're surrounded by regular old folks, that are doing the best they can, but, might have some challenging interactions with us. And then, like you said, we get shamed, we get shut down, we feel like nobody is there to really receive who we are. And sometimes people are rejecting our, what you might typically think of, like, if you're having a tantrum, but often parents can't tolerate the light and the playfulness and the being and the exuberance a child brings, is because it's too much, and and if they didn't have support and holding for that part of themselves when they were younger, they might actually reject a child when they're in their really essential self. So it's a complicated thing, but and also children understand a lot more than we think they're understanding, I think, generally.
Well, Diane, we're going to have to take a station break.
Okay.
Diane and I will return very shortly, so please don't go away. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org. What is your attachment style?
Mine
with this
personally.
hour discussing attachment theory is Diane Poole Heller, author of The Power of Attachment: How to Create Deep and Lasting Intimate Relationships. So, Diane, what are the different attachment styles, and can you give a brief description of each?
Okay. First of all, I want to mention that we can have a mix of attachment styles because your attachment system is responsive to the relationship that you're currently in, right? So it'll pull on your attachment style in a certain direction. But often we have sort of a general default attachment style that we reacted to our original relationships when we were young, and and these patterns are often repeated so that it gets ingrained in how we react in relationships. So the 4 attachment styles I'll mention are the secure attachment, which is a little bit like hitting the jackpot, where you have a pro-social family. They're very relationally attuned. Parents reflect your emotional states. They're playful. They're safe. They're protective. They're consistently responsive to need, or to, even if like, oh, mommy, look at the sunset, they're responsive to what and aligning with what's happening inside the child's world. And, nobody has to be perfect. I really want to make sure I'm not putting that message out there, because we can repair little misattunements that happen with attachment. So repair is one of the major skill sets that people that are oriented more to secure attachment have. Like, they notice, oh, you know what? I was kind of abrupt this morning when I was shoving you off to the school bus to go to school because you got up late, and it was a struggle to get your clothes and lunch bag and all that together. So I'm, at the end of the day, the kid comes home and you're like, oh, honey, I'm sorry. It was pretty chaotic this morning. Let's get up 15 minutes early so we can enjoy our time together and not have it be so stressful. Let's work out some. What would work for you? What do you think? So just knowing that you kind of are in an awkward place with someone and that a repair is needed is attunement. Some people just aren't particularly even aware when they've just run over somebody, so emotionally. So that is a huge thing. In fact, John Gottman's research says that in couples, the more that the couple knows how to initiate and receive repair messages, you have an 85% increased percentage of sustainable well-being in your relationship. So that's a pretty high return on your investment, right? And when I ask people, when I'm in live situations, if their parents really modeled effective apology and repair, usually about 5% of the audience says they had that growing up. So this is a gigantic thing for all of us to get better at and learn how to do, because the payoff is so huge. So it's a really important takeaway for today. And that's secure.
That's secure. So that's the one of the 4, right?
Yes, that's what we're trying to get back to. I like to spend a lot of time on what secure is, because I believe we're all biologically programmed. We inherit this capacity for secure functioning and operating, but sometimes a lot of things get in the way. And so now I'm going to talk about the styles where things got in the way and how they got in the way, and then what usually help people respond. I do want to mention that when I'm giving this list of symptoms or list of challenges, that it doesn't mean you have all of them. You may have it come up in a particular relationship. You may have it generally, but you really only have one part of it. So I'm going to give you what most people are experiencing in a bigger picture, but I want you to understand, I'm not saying if you have the style that you have all of the attributes of it. And I feel like I'm an equal opportunity attachment person, because I have enough injury and enough health in these different ones that I can relate to them myself deeply personally, which is helpful for me. The first one, and they aren't actually sequential. They all could happen as soon as in utero and as soon as someone's born. So that it's not like one is further along than the other, but they are different. The first one we call avoidant attachment. As a child, as an adult, it's referred to as dismissive. There are different terminologies out there with different authors. So I'm going to give you my one set of those. This is a common one. When someone has tilted towards avoidant attachment, usually the parenting situation they've grown up with is a parent who's just vacant, like they're just not there. And like you said earlier, babies are reaching out, they're gurgling, they're looking for connection, they're trying to pull your hair, they're doing something to try to engage. They're not just blank slates. But a parent can't respond in a way that's nurturing. So, and usually that's a parent that just has healing that they need to do, right? They just had something happen to them. Maybe that was the way it was when they grew up. It gets very easily transferred through the generations. So it's helpful for us to understand what we also grew up with ourselves. And so what will happen if a parent's vacant is one way that happens. Another way avoidant will happen is if a parent's actively rejecting. So if someone's like looking at you as a little infant and as you're growing up with hatred or anger or disgust or contempt or, through the eyes, that's really that eye contact's really powerful. It can just shrink your soul if somebody's looking at you that way. I had a mother who looked at me that way because she had some difficult things happening when I was born. And it takes a while to get over that. That's not a small thing. So because every time you look at someone's eyes, you're expecting, because it got programmed in, expecting rejection, or expecting hatred, or expecting anger. So it takes a while to heal that. We'd have different things we suggest as practices to help heal that attachment gaze. One exercise would be looking out in the world and remembering or seeing in your mind's eye kind eyes looking back at you, whether that was your grandmother or your dog or somebody out of a movie.
Why the eyes? Why are the eyes
so
so
they
important?
say eyes are windows of the soul. I mean, just think about when someone looks at you, how deeply it affects you, how they look at you, right? And a really easy, really bonding, to support bonding, because one of the things we're talking about is failure to bond. We want to talk about how to heal bonding, is to practice looking at people with kindness and compassion, especially yourself, but everybody else. Just like when you, even at the bank or the grocery store, when they're bagging your groceries, just to shoot people I like you kind of look, and you can see the impact that will have on people. And there's really two parts to that exercise. One is like looking out and finding kind eyes in your mind's eye, or actually in the world. Maybe that's even coming from a stranger, and just letting yourself take that in. I had a person who was doing this exercise, and she could go out and see kind eyes, but when she tried to take it in, she had a block. She couldn't actually receive the kindness. And we found out that she had this like transparent wall, like a membrane almost, was like a protective boundary. And we unpacked that. We realized she had that. It's kind of a way to protect herself, because she had a stepfather in childhood that looked at her inappropriately, looked at her with a lustful, not a good parent-child dynamic. So as we healed that, we worked through that, because she wasn't even conscious she had that, then she could take kindness in. But you think about how important it is to have your eyes, like a friend of mine says, like magnets, to take in positive energy. And how easy it is to do once you have that capacity. I mean, you could be at a party with your spouse, and they're on one end of the room, and you're on the other end of the room talking to different people, and you can just shoot them on "you're special to me" look across the room. Takes like 2 seconds, or an "I love you" look in your eyes across the room, and that's actually enhancing your attachment nourishment, and it's enhancing your capacity to bond. So what I've tried to do is break down every element of bonding and look at how do we repair it. Like, how do we either learn how to receive it like she was able to receive, and we do our own homework to do that. And then we also learn how to presence secure attachment in the world, which is a gigantic contribution right now, is to keep in contact with your own resiliency, your own capacity to send out good things to other people, and
isn't that what you get back? I mean, if you're able to meet people with kind eyes, the response is a totally different animal
Exactly.
than if you're walking around dead-eyed.
Yeah.
I mean, your whole world changes the minute you're able to make that connection, doesn't it?
That's how powerful working with attachment is. You can take one thing like eye contact, and it can shift everything. It can be very, very powerful. And you think about safe touch, you think about, staying responsive with someone, like even answering texts relatively quickly, so that you're staying tethered to the people that are important to you. And actually,
have you ever, is part of this where if you don't have that connection, if you don't stay, don't respond, then that leaves the other person a lot of places to start filling in the gap with paranoia and negative messaging. And, oh, I must have done something wrong. They're ignoring me, whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
I had a friend who used to always sign his emails with a colon and a parentheses, like a smile thing. And so I always thought that was kind of cool. And then he stopped doing it. And I mean, that's how sensitive the attachment system can be. And I was like, what did I do wrong? And I must have been. And so 2 weeks go by, and he finally writes me, I got a new phone, and I don't know how to do that thing. And I had made up all these stories about,
you're down the road with it, right?
I must have said the wrong thing. I was feeling really bad. It's very relational things that's why repair is so important. You've got to, like, when he communicated he had a new phone, I was like, Oh, thank goodness. You know, a big relief. So avoidant also can set up with parents that can connect, but they only connect on teaching you something, left brain activity. Healthy attachments really needs the right brain, you know, the imbalance with the left, but we really need right brain connection. So if we don't have right brain connection, then people will tend to become avoidantly attached. And let's
So
talk about what
what
that
does
looks like, you
yeah,
know?
yeah, what does right brain attachment look like?
Well, right brain, I'm going to talk about in just a minute, but what
Okay.
happens when you don't have it, or you have the negative rejection, or you have the severe neglect, which all can be ways that avoidant attachment sets up. People, it's like I'm looking out to my caregiver, whether that's moms and dads, or mom and dad, or dads, moms, grandparents, older sibling, whoever that is. I'm trying to make this connection happen, and when I'm rejected, or there's no one home, like there's this vacancy, or there's just the left brain teaching kind of thing, then what happens is I feel like no one's there. There's not any emotional nuance. There's no one reflecting my emotions. Like, oh, sweetheart, I can see you're really feeling sad. Your brother just broke your new toy. I'm really sorry that happened. Come here, let me give you a hug. And yeah, I feel sad too. I still see you're really feeling sad. Oh, I can see you're also feeling mad. You know, that reflection is part and parcel to how we develop a strong sense of self, like really know our emotions, know ourselves. That's very right brain, what I just did. Very right brain. And that's really important. And when people didn't get that, they very often either don't have an emotional range, or their emotions are kind of disowned, like they kind of put them away in a closet, or they just feel like nobody's going to understand them, which is really hard, you know, and their emotional self is sort of lost, right? So one of the things we're trying to do is bring our natural capacity for emotion back online, but that will happen through reflection and accurate reflection, because sometimes you have parents that are angry, but they're smiling over the anger. You know, they're communicating an incoherent emotional state. That's not good either. That doesn't help.
Because
So
kids sure feel
avoidance.
that, don't they?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're wired to understand or be confused by mixed signals, emotionally and with connection, and it deeply affects our capacity to bond. So an avoidant might feel like it's not safe to have needs because their needs were never acknowledged or attuned to. They might feel like it's not okay to have an emotion, or certain emotions are off limits, you know, taboo. So we need to bring those disowned emotions back into the person's life. And everybody has a superpower, even if with an attachment difficulty. And the superpower for avoidance is they don't get distracted by the emotional kerfuffle or difficulty that might be happening on a team. They get the job done. They're like production oriented. So, you know, society likes that, you know, get the job done, be productive, sell the most cars, whatever.
Push right
They
on
don't.
through it. Well,
Yeah. So,
it's time for us to take another
oh, okay.
station break. Diane and I will be right back to continue our discussion. Please stay right there. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org. Did you ever really get over it? What are the long lasting effects of trauma? This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. With us discussing trauma and its long term impact is Diane Poole Heller. Her website, traumasolutions.com. Diane, what is the long term effect of trauma?
Well, it depends. There are a lot of variables to that answer that question, but one of the things that I think is most regrettable is it does interrupt our connection to other people that we were talking about a little bit earlier, and and our connection to ourselves. Sometimes if, you know, our body has been really uncomfortable because of a traumatic experience that hasn't been resolved, we don't even want to feel our bodies. You know, we're disembodied to some extent. It interrupts our ability to be present in the moment. It often disrupts relationships in a really devastating way. So we lose connection with really important parts of love and life.
Do we set up defense mechanisms that compound that? In other words,
Yes.
okay. Go ahead.
Yes, it's natural for us to do that. And I believe that our basic nature is love. We come back to ourselves, that we have a sense of kindness, a sense of love, a sense of harmony, an ability to want what's best for other people and for ourselves. We have that as a basic nature, but that can get interrupted by what I was talking about earlier. And there are other attachment styles that have challenges. I don't we want to go in that direction at the moment, but that's a possibility.
Well, if we aren't received, then does that leave us kind of crippled in the being able to give department if we were never received? It's like we don't feel like we have anything to offer.
It can be that receiving is very interesting. In the attachment style of ambivalent, they're a person that has very right brain oriented. They really want connection. They're kind of in a way almost obsessed about relationship. They really want that. But in the ambivalent attachment injury, they tend to have a very sensitive to different attachment dynamics, different relational cues, but they tend to interpret them negatively. And so they miss caring behaviors. There could be caring behaviors happening in their life, but they just don't see them. And that's partly because they have trouble receiving. And partly they have trouble receiving because early on, they got the patterning that they had parents that were there and then parents that weren't there. They on and again, off again kind of experience of love and connection. So it created anxiety, like, is my parent going to be there, or is my partner going to be there, or are they not going to be there? And because they tend to see things through a negative bias, they tend to think, okay, I'm going to get abandoned. I'm going to be betrayed. I'm going to be dropped. And so they're anticipating that. They're projecting that from their early childhood onto their spouse or their partner or their, friends or their workers, coworkers, whatever. And so they often can even pick fights, because they're trying to defend against being abandoned, and there's a fear of abandonment. So definitely the defenses come into play relationally in that way. And one of the things that we have to correct is the ability to receive that you're talking about, because I do this exercise where I have people kind of just put every loving behavior or words or activities or touch or anything on a big feast on a table, and then ask them to see if they could take it in, because the inability to receive for the ambivalent is often unconscious. And when I ask them to take everything they want to actually receive it, they usually contract. And they're like surprised by that, like, oh, I can't do that. It's too much. And I'm like, exactly. So we have to help you learn.
There's
how
your
to
sign, right?
Yes. So let's take 1%. Just pick one thing or 1% of one thing, and they, oh yeah, I can. Oh, I can take 1%. I can feel fulfillment. I can feel satisfaction, because what they have kind of bound together is the experience of wanting love and connection, but feeling like that as soon as they get it, the next bad thing that's going to happen is they're going to lose it in a way that was really hurtful.
So they're always waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Exactly. So we have to tease those apart and have them actually receive the caring behaviors and feel them in their body, so they feel like they can receive. And then in a practice of when anybody does anything kind, first of all, to look and scan for it. And secondly, stay present when it's happening, so you can actually take it in and feel the fulfillment and notice, not going to be true all the time, but nothing bad is happening. Nothing, this pattern is an old pattern. It doesn't have to be part of your life today. This happened when I was married. My husband said to me, I love you so much, but when I'm really loving towards you, I do this or I do that. You just deflect it. And I'm like, of course, I got mad first. I said, I do not. What are you talking about? And then I woke up in the middle of the night and I went, oh, I am doing that. I am. I didn't grow up in a super loving environment, so I didn't know what to do with it. I was like in foreign territory. So then I made a practice. I apologized to him. I said, you're right. I can see how much it hurts you that I don't take in your love. I'm sorry. I get that I'm wounding you. And I said, so I'm going to do this practice whenever something kind is happening, whether it's with you or anybody in my life. I'm going to put my feet to the fire and stay present and deal with my awkwardness and let myself really practice letting it in to the best of my ability, so I can start to develop a capacity to tolerate love. It sounds funny because we think we could automatically tolerate that, but not necessarily. If you didn't have it in early childhood, it's really hard to know what to do with it later on. So you can
when you have an on again, off again kind of parent or situation, does a child tend to think it's something that they've done, and so then
Mhm.
they're trying to constantly adjust around something that wasn't theirs in the first place?
You are right on it. That is so true. It's like, well, I'm tying myself in a knot. No, my parent was loving, and then what did I do that it stopped? Did I talk too much? Did I get too excited? Did I leave my jacket on the doorknob? What did I do? So there's this constant self evaluation and kind of an abandonment of self, because everything, like the parents, becomes like a moving target. How do I get their love? How do I catch them? How do I get it again? And
Mhm.
that becomes kind of obsessive, possibly. And then you're always externalizing, and you don't have much awareness for yourself, like what's going on with me. It's all about, how do I get this person to connect and stop disconnecting. And so we lose contact with ourselves. And the problem with that is we've already abandoned ourselves. So even if love comes, we're not
We're not
there.
there. Nobody's home.
Exactly. So
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
self-fulfilling prophecy, and a lot of suffering that we can correct once we understand it.
So the authenticity is gone then too, isn't it?
Right.
Because everything in you is out there trying to please somebody else so that they're there for you,
Right.
and they can't be there for you because you're not there.
Exactly. And the other thing is, when you're always externalizing, there's a kind of a felt sense belief in the ambivalent part of the injury, can be that you feel like you can only regulate, you can only get comfort from the other person, which sometimes puts a lot of pressure on that significant other, whatever role they're in your life with. And almost you end up pushing away the person you most want to be close to, because there's like a flooding of emotion. There's a flooding of need, because there's a felt belief that came up over time that the only way you can get what you need, or feel the support you need, is from someone else. So part of the balancing act is to help a person individually learn how to self-soothe, how to self-regulate. Doesn't mean you don't want to have a relationship. Relationships are important, but the avoidant we talked about earlier shuts down the attachment system, and the ambivalent amps it up. It's like the attachment system on steroids. So there's like it can look like a lot of clinginess. It can,
Uh-huh.
at extremes, be demanding, and sometimes if you have a little bit of ambivalent, you tend to feel like you're chronically disappointed. Like people are just going to disappoint you. If you have a lot of it, you're angry because you feel like they're going to actively abandon you. They're going to hurt you really a lot, like happened over and over again in childhood. So that's what we're trying to help people see, is how do we mend the things that happened, whatever they were. How do we meet those unmet needs in childhood? Even like going to well, when do you first remember having this feeling? Oh, I was 5 years old. Well, how do I bring in something that meets that need of the wounded child that's still wounded, so that it can take in what it needed, maybe not from the original parents, but maybe from a spouse, or maybe from someone, a teacher or a spiritual teacher, or someone that inspires them. And then they can repair that original wound. And then that inner child, in a way, can release that wound and regain its creativity and aliveness, or even grow up and mature and integrate into the adult self. So that's not behind the scenes, sometimes disrupting relationships.
So as we're working with these things, and we're able to, and I can see the usefulness of finding what our particular niche is as far as where our wounding is and what we need to work on. But is there a tendency to identify it with, oh, I'm just avoidant, oh, I'm just, this sort of thing, and identify with it and get it stuck even worse?
Well, that's something that I'm glad you brought that up, because I always talk about that. This is not about finding a label and smacking it on your forehead. We're trying to look at, how do we move our families forward? How do we understand some of what each attachment style needs, and honor that, and not blame a person for it, but actually compassionately interact with them. So for instance, if someone has an avoidant pattern, their knee-jerk reaction may be to isolate, because they know how to take care of themselves in isolation. So it's kind of like they go scuba dive deep into themselves, right? But kind of in a little bit dissociative way, because they go deep into themselves. So if you know that about your partner, that they go deep into themselves, and you want to invite them out for their birthday or something, hey honey, I want to take you to your favorite restaurant, and it's going to be great. Instead of, can we go now? The person will probably give you a disgruntled response, because they're deep inside themselves and you're interrupting that. But if you say, hey, honey, can you, I'd love to take you out for your birthday. I'd really love to do that. How much time do you need to surface from the computer? How much time do you need to feel like it's time to go?
Can I
And they
make an
might
appointment?
kind of, yeah, like I need 20 minutes. Okay, great. I'll be back in 20 minutes and I'll be ready to rock and roll, you know? But if you don't understand that they need time to surface, just like if you come up from scuba diving too fast, you get the bends, right? You get the emotional bends, or you're going to get the disgruntled, angry, dismissive, avoidant attitude if you ask someone for too immediate connection, because connection is hard for the avoidant. If you're married to or in partnership with somebody who's ambivalent, connection's really easy. They want it all the time. There's like no problem. But being on one's own in an autonomous way is hard. So separations are really hard for the ambivalent. So if the avoidant knows that's really hard for the ambivalent, they go, oh, honey, I know you've got to go on this business trip. I'm leaving, but I just want you to know you're in my heart. I'm taking you with me, and I'll text you when I get to the airport, and then I'll text you when I get to the hotel, and I'll let you know how things are going. To keep some communication going, that's very reassuring to the ambivalent who's expecting abandonment. So there's certain behaviors that are very healthy that we can easily do. And the more we do them, it's not that we have to do them forever even necessarily, but as we do them, we're actually healing the attachment back towards secure attachment. And that's where we have a confidence in the relationship. We have a give and take. We have consistent responsiveness. We have playfulness. We have coming and going rituals of how we separate and how we come together again, even after the workday. Like if you know to drop what you're doing and really enthusiastically greet your partner at the door, and then go, instead of, a lot of us, have the habit of our partner comes in, hey, you forgot to take out the garbage, or did you pick up the milk, or can you help with the kids' homework? We immediately go into tasking, which is not terrible. It's just that it's not the most bonding. We're not taking advantage of the attachment system that wants to have a welcome home hug, as Stan Tatkin would call it, where you have body to body, and each body is regulating the other body in the hug. You have to stay in the hug long enough for that to happen and feel both bodies regulate. And bodies want to be with other people that are regulating. So it's very bonding. Instead of these pyramid hugs that sometimes happen, I notice in my culture, people kind of pat you on the back, but they're like standing really far apart from you. That's not going to do it.
Or air kiss.
Yeah.
Don't forget that one.
We do a lot of things that create distance when we're seemingly trying to create connection, but it's really easy once you know what the attachment system longs for. Kind eyes, right? Safe touch, bodies that regulate each other, routines around how do you get up in the morning? Do you immediately get on your phone? I mean, everybody's doing this, right? That's like what we're doing. But do you make breakfast together and you don't have the phones involved? You just have some time to talk with each other. You have the newspaper in front of your face. You actually are interacting, or you're cooking breakfast together, or you walk the dog together. You're
It's that time again.
I
We're
know.
going to take another station break. Please stay with us as Diane and I continue to explore trauma, attachment, and resilience. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org. Are you resilient? This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. We're continuing our discussion with Diane Poole Heller. Her website, traumasolutions.com. Diane, we started talking about resilience early on, just a little mention of it, but it seems like resilience is something that a lot of people are lacking anymore. How do we build resilience, and why is it so important?
I think we are built for transformation and healing. I think we are designed to do that. But sometimes we do things culturally or just whatever from our histories that don't really take us in that direction. So it's such an important thing to talk about. First of all, sometimes in certain generations or certain situations, people are trying to get the whole environment to convert itself to not be uncomfortable or to be perfect or to be, all the right everything. And that's a lot of work, right? And I don't know that it's even possible, actually. But learning how to be adaptive, learning how to be resilient, learning how to see the intention behind something, even if it's not the exact right word, being able to deal with difficult times and access a support system, or find someone that's empathetic that can be with you and help you process it, even if that's a friend or a peer or a therapist or a spiritual teacher, whoever that is, or your dog, your teddy bear, I don't know what, something where it really needs to be a live person to really hold whatever's arising for you. Builds resilience. And then as we get fill in some of our trauma wounds or our early attachment injuries, those sorts of things, we actually, like people say, I just want to be normal. I just want to be the way I was before. And I always say to people, you're never going to be the way you were before this difficult thing happened, because you have to pull on so many resources, and so much resiliency building has to happen for you to get to the other side of this. You're going to be a much bigger, more mature, more compassionate, loving person after this is over. And I said, I'll hold that till you find that out yourself. But it is what will happen. Post-traumatic growth happens from integrating unintegratable things in the beginning, really difficult, fragmented states, overwhelming emotions, or big dissociations that happen from the fracturing or the feeling kind of smashed by a trauma. And
So let me see if I understand here. So you have some big trauma happen, and it just throws you out of your ballpark, okay?
Mhm.
And you can stay there, and you can build defense mechanisms around it, and this and that and the next thing, and then you are forever diminished.
Right.
If you take the other road where you process what's happened to you, go through the steps, and that is what builds resilience, right?
Yes.
It's the moving
Yes.
through it, not the
Yes.
never having had it happen, and not the avoiding the things that happen to us because of it.
Right. And the trick to that is dosing and pacing. Like if you try to take on too much of your trauma history at once, it'll blow you out again. You probably just dissociate and
Lovely.
get flooded. But if you take a piece of it and then you sometimes match that with something that was resourcing or something that was supportive, and then your nervous system's designed to process arousal, right? But if the arousal's too high, like you go to panic attacks or rage outbursts, that's too high sympathetic. Or if it crashes into too low, the parasympathetic gets overactivated, you can go into shutdown, depression, digestive disorders, problems, right? The other way. So like there's a range of resiliency, or Dan Siegel calls it the window of tolerance, that the nervous system operates in, that's ideal. So if you just stay within it, you're not going to process trauma either. You have to kind of like go up into a little bit of the over arousal, like maybe the fear or the anger or whatever it is, not too far, not all the way up into an arousal spike like the Rocky Mountains here, right? But just a little bit out of the range of resiliency or window of tolerance. Then you're kind of grabbing that excess arousal and then processing it through the normal way the nervous system immigrates. Then you can go through overwhelming events without being overwhelmed in the process during the healing process. And that's really important. I feel like my job is the guardian of making sure things are challenging but not overwhelming as we go through a trauma, either direction, like too much sympathetic or too much parasympathetic in the nervous system activation. So, but our bodies are designed to do that. What gets in the way of that happening is we go into these arousal spikes, either like real high sympathetic or real low, making a V, down here of the parasympathetic. And if we can find that middle zone and we work within that middle zone, I think you can heal just about anything, no matter how horrific it was to begin with.
Well, there's this concept. It's a Celtic concept, old Celtic shamanic concept, actually, where there's this sine wave, the joy sorrow sine wave, and if you try to avoid your sorrow, then it limits how much you can enter your joy. So
Yes.
if you're always moving the sine wave with nice big waves, but not spikes,
Right.
is that the ideal? Is that what we're shooting for
Yes,
there?
that's a perfect way to say it. I love that. It's a perfect way to say it. And so sometimes you're in a sine wave and you hit a spike because it can come out of nowhere sometimes. But then you know that you need to do more resourcing. Think about people that are supportive to you. Think about things you love, like nature, your dog, art, dancing, whatever it is, and bring in something that lowers that arousal level, lowers the spike to become back into the wave that you just mentioned, and then your body will process it. It'll in fact, it goes from a constriction to a gradual expansion, and then you get a bigger range of resiliency or a bigger window of tolerance. So you can actually, as you heal each difficult thing in your history or whatever's happening in your life, you actually build resilience. And so you can handle more stress or more difficult things because you have a wider range of capacity to do that. And it keeps growing and growing and growing. The more you do it, the more you're like working out your trauma transformation muscles, you know? And so if something else, because, you know, life keeps bringing something stressful. It's just kind of part of the
Let's
human
face
journey.
it. Well, you said something interesting. You said so your body can process it. Would you go into that a little bit? Let's bring the body into this picture.
Well, I really feel that our nervous systems are designed to integrate your autonomic nervous system I'm referring to, but we have different nervous systems. They're all on board in different ways. But the autonomic nervous system will give you trauma resolution signals. Like if you go from cold to like a nice, cozy, warm, that's your autonomic nervous system saying, green light, we're going in a good direction. I'm feeling better. If you kind of hunched over like this and your spine like just naturally elongates as you're processing and you get this lengthening, that's a trauma resolution, physical trauma resolution signal. If your breathing gets deeper and more even and you can have a little more energy on the exhale naturally, then your autonomic nervous system is managing what are considered involuntary responses, but they get in balance again when we do the proper healing of the traumatic experience.
Can this work in the opposite? In other words, when you're starting to really feel difficult, just stop and correct your posture and take that breath. Does it work in reverse like that?
Well, that'll help for sure, but we're trying. Here's the thing. In an ideal scenario, we're trying to have the body do this naturally without us. Like I could say to anybody, take a deep breath, right? But what I'm trying to do when I'm working through someone through trauma is keep working with whatever the material is, whatever the story is. And then I see their breathing change. Like their autonomic nervous system did it organically. That's a stronger resolution, you know, than because you know, you can train yourself to take deep breaths. Nothing wrong with taking, you know, breathing in the correct way. Although they say taking deep breaths is not the best way to breathe. I just found out. You want to make sure you exhale longer than you inhale. But I'm trying to watch the autonomic nervous system take over and regulate even in the face of challenge versus having somebody, I mean, I could have somebody, go ride your bike for 35 minutes to get rid of your anxiety, and it might help, but I want to actually get rid of the anxiety, whatever the trigger is for the anxiety, so the person doesn't have to ride their bike 35 minutes. They just extinguish that symptom. So that's kind of the ultimate goal. And in the meantime, if that's not possible, I might say to somebody, you know, breathe a certain way. But ideally, we want the body to take over the role of transforming the trauma into healthy biological reactions.
So if you're starting to feel overwhelmed, you can use those as tools, but it's still important to get to the root cause.
Well, definitely, I think for permanent change, what I think is that all of us have these amazing human bodies and human souls and human minds, but we have these amazing bodies that know how to process everyday life experience and also really difficult life experience, but it has to be within that range for it to function. It's just like, you know, I know you guys have Thanksgiving too, but it's like when you overeat at any holiday, right? You stuff yourself in the name of the holiday. And then you're like, oh my goodness, it's like way too much for you to metabolize it. You got to walk around the block a few times. I mean, if you just eat the normal amount, right, your metabolism knows how to do that. So if you think about trauma, it's kind of like overloaded metabolism of life experience, you know, whatever was difficult, that you were trying to chunk it down and give it time and let it metabolize. And it like, you don't have to tell yourself to metabolize breakfast, right? Or lunch or dinner, you don't even think about it. Well, if we're in the right range, your body will transform. The other piece that I said earlier is so important is the presence of someone, so you don't feel like you're alone. It's hard to do this if it's especially a really challenging situation to do it alone. If someone's with you, that's present, that's kind, that doesn't mean maybe not even saying anything, they're just there for you, or maybe they're saying the right things, or they're touching your forearm or something safe, you know, putting their foot gently on your foot to help your grounding, whatever that might be. That's a gigantic advantage. So I just want to say to people, if you have anybody that can help you, whether it's a peer, a friend, a spouse, ideally a therapist that's informed with trauma and attachment, if that's possible, then it's just so much easier to get to the other side. And you already had a hard time. We don't want the healing to be super hard on top of that, you know?
Well said. Well, it's that time in the show, Diane, when I get to ask you, what's your mission?
Oh, my mission is very clear. I had a near-death experience about 12 years ago, and I came out of it with a very clear additional mission, which was to support anyone that's doing really good healing work in the world, to bring light into the world with healing and what's possible for all of us as humans, and to restore people to their natural state of a loving nature.
Boy, do we need more of that. Tell me about your near-death experience.
Oh, I had a really difficult surgery, two surgeries, and I sort of died on the first one, and then I didn't. And then they went in, they made mistakes in the first one, and they tried to correct the mistakes in the second one. They made 3 more mistakes in the second one. So then I was gone again. I went pretty far into a death experience, and then they wanted to do a third surgery. I'm like, no, I'm not doing a third surgery.
Well,
And
go ahead.
yeah.
I'm glad you hung with us, Diane.
I know. I hung in there.
You hung in there. You hung in there. And probably built some resilience in the process, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. As hard as that experience was, it's also been really helpful in a lot of ways.
It sure changes perspective, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, Diane, we are out of time now, but thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed being here.
Our guest this hour has been Diane Poole Heller, an internationally recognized speaker, author, and expert in the field of attachment theory and trauma resolution. Her books include The Power of Attachment, How to Create Deep and Lasting Intimate Relationships, Crash Course, and Healing Your Attachment Wounds. To find out more about Diane, where you can find her books and all she has to offer, visit her website, traumasolutions.com. This has been Mission Evolution with Gwilda Wiyaka. For more information or to enjoy past archived episodes, visit missionevolution.org. But please be sure to join us again right here on the Voice of Canada Broadcast Network, vocbn.ca. This mission will continue, bringing information, resources, and support to our rapidly evolving world.